What would you do if you discovered that your entire marriage was a lie? That the person sleeping next to you for 8 years wasn't just cheating on you, but had been systematically stealing your identity to run a criminal empire worth $847 million? Dr. Elena Vasquez thought she knew her husband, Michael Chen, successful investment manager, pillar of the Greenwich, Connecticut community, the perfect partner to support her through a breast cancer diagnosis. She was wrong about everything. Elena was actually married to the mastermind of one of the largest financial crime organizations on the East Coast, an organization that had murdered 3 witnesses, corrupted 12 federal officials, and positioned Elena as the fall guy for crimes she didn't even know were happening. But Michael made one critical mistake. He underestimated what happens when you betray a forensic accountant who'd spent 15 years putting financial criminals in federal prison. Elena Vasquez was known at the SEC as the numbers never lie, the woman who could follow money trails through any criminal organization. Now it was personal. This is the story of how a cancer patient became the key witness in the largest organized crime takedown in Connecticut history. And if this story keeps you on the edge of your seat, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's story will shock you even more. The irony wasn't lost on her. For 15 years, she'd been the SEC's go-to forensic accountant, the woman who could spot a hidden transaction in a haystack of legitimate trades, who could follow money trails through offshore labyrinths that would make a Greek mythologist dizzy. The numbers never lie. That's what they called her at the bureau. Elena Vasquez could detect financial fraud from 3 spreadsheets and a bank statement. But she'd never thought to audit her own marriage. Martinez entered with that careful expression oncologists perfected. Professional compassion tempered with clinical distance. Elena noticed how his eyes flicked to Michael, still absorbed in his device, and something almost imperceptible crossed the doctor's face. Disapproval, maybe. Or perhaps just recognition of a pattern he'd seen too many times before. Mrs. Vasquez, Mr. Chen. Dr. Martinez began settling into his chair. Michael looked up briefly, offered a tight smile, then immediately returned to his screen. Elena caught a glimpse of what held his attention so completely. Not email, not news, but some kind of trading interface with numbers that seemed to be updating in real time during her cancer consultation. The biopsy results show invasive ductal carcinoma. Dr. Martinez continued, his voice gentle but matter-of-fact. Stage 2 hormone receptor positive. The good news is that we caught it early and the treatment protocol is very well established. Elena felt the words wash over her like cold water, but her analytical mind was already processing, categorizing, filing the information into neat mental folders. Stage 2. Treatment protocol. Survival rates. Cost projections. Her brain worked the same way whether she was facing a complex fraud case or a life-threatening diagnosis. Break it down, analyze the components, develop a strategy. What's the treatment timeline? She asked, proud that her voice remained steady. Surgery first, then chemotherapy and radiation. We're looking at roughly 6 months of active treatment, followed by hormone therapy for 5 years. Michael's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and Elena saw his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. Something was wrong. Not wrong with her diagnosis, which was certainly bad enough, but wrong with whatever was happening on that screen. Michael's fingers moved quickly across the interface, and she caught a glimpse of what looked like large numbers transfers account balances. The survival rates for this stage and type are excellent, Dr. Martinez was saying. We're looking at about a 95% 5-year survival rate with proper treatment. Elena nodded, still watching Michael peripherally. His phone buzzed again, and this time his reaction was more pronounced. A sharp intake of breath followed by rapid typing. She knew that look. She'd seen it on the faces of defendants when they realized their carefully constructed lies were unraveling. Mr. Chen, Dr. Martinez said pointedly, do you have any questions about your wife's treatment plan? Michael looked up startled, as if he'd forgotten where he was. Oh, yes, no. It sounds like you have everything under control. He slipped the phone into his jacket pocket, but Elena could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his left hand kept twitching toward the device. Something was very, very wrong. And Elena Vasquez, the woman who'd built her career on following money trails and detecting financial irregularities, was about to discover that the biggest fraud of her life had been happening right under her own roof. Elena Marie Vasquez had always believed that numbers told the truth when people wouldn't. It was a philosophy born from growing up in a household where her father's construction business barely survived month to month, where her mother performed mathematical miracles to stretch grocery budgets, and where financial transparency was the difference between keeping the lights on and sitting in darkness. The scholarship to MIT had been her escape route, but more than that, it had been her vindication. While other students partied through their economics courses, Elena dissected financial models with the intensity of a surgeon. She earned her PhD in 3 years, writing a dissertation on behavioral patterns in corporate financial fraud that became required reading in white-collar crime courses across the country. Her office at the SEC's Hartford Regional Center reflected 15 years of meticulous career-building diplomas and certifications lined one wall, while the opposite wall displayed newspaper clippings from high-profile cases she'd cracked. The Meridian insurance embezzlement, the Hartford pension fund fraud, the notorious Greenwich grandmother Ponzi scheme that had bilked elderly residents out of $40 million. Each case had been a puzzle, and Elena possessed an almost supernatural ability to see the patterns others missed. Elena doesn't just follow the money, her former supervisor used to joke. She thinks like the money, and her annual salary of $350,000 placed her firmly in Connecticut's upper middle class. But Elena lived with the same financial discipline that had carried her through childhood. She drove a 3-year-old Honda Accord, shopped at Costco, and lived in a modest colonial in Greenwich's less fashionable western section. The only luxury she allowed herself was a home office equipped with 3 monitors and the kind of analytical software that could process millions of financial transactions in minutes. Michael Chen had entered her life 8 years ago at a financial crime symposium in Manhattan. He'd been presenting on ethical investment strategies for high-net-worth clients, and she'd been immediately drawn to his apparent integrity. While other investment managers talked about maximizing returns regardless of risk, Michael spoke passionately about fiduciary responsibility and protecting vulnerable clients. Chen and associates occupied 2 floors of a gleaming building in Greenwich's financial district. Michael had built the firm from nothing, starting as a one-man operation and growing to manage over $2 billion in assets. His client list read like a who's who of Connecticut's elite retired pharmaceutical executives, hedge fund founders, old money families whose wealth stretched back generations. "We're not just managing money," Michael often said at industry conferences. "We're managing dreams, legacies, futures." It was this philosophy that had attracted Elena this apparent understanding that behind every portfolio was a human being with hopes and fears and responsibilities. Their courtship had been refreshingly straightforward. Michael respected Elena's career and never showed the insecurity that some men displayed when their partners out-earned them. He encouraged her work, asked intelligent questions about her cases, and seemed genuinely proud of her expertise. When fraud became front-page news, Michael would text her articles with notes like, "Bet you could have caught this years earlier," or "These guys needed to hire you as a consultant." Their wedding had been elegant but modest, Elena's choice. She'd prosecuted enough fraud cases to know that ostentatious displays of wealth often indicated money that couldn't bear scrutiny. Michael had seemed to appreciate her preference for understated elegance over flashy excess. Their Greenwich home was a 1950s colonial they'd bought together, though Elena had insisted on keeping their finances largely separate. "Old habit," she'd explained. "When you spend your days investigating financial crimes between spouses, you learn the value of clear boundaries." Michael had laughed and agreed, calling it professional paranoia in the best possible way. For 8 years, their arrangement had worked perfectly. Michael managed his high-stakes investment world while Elena pursued increasingly complex fraud cases. They traveled together, always somewhere Elena had never been, always somewhere Michael insisted they needed to experience. Europe twice, Asia once, and several trips to Caribbean islands, with robust banking privacy laws. Elena had never questioned these travel choices. Michael worked hard and deserved exotic vacations. She'd been too busy with her own career to analyze the pattern, to notice that their destinations invariably included countries with bank secrecy laws and limited financial disclosure requirements. Their dinner conversations revolved around work, Elena sharing the intellectual challenges of financial forensics, Michael discussing the complexities of managing wealth for demanding clients. He was particularly animated when talking about his elderly clients, praising their wisdom and expressing genuine concern for their financial security in retirement. These people worked their entire lives. He'd say, pouring wine in their kitchen while Elena worked on her laptop. They deserve to enjoy their golden years without worrying about money. That's where I come in, making sure their investments are safe, their returns are steady, their futures are secure. Elena had found this dedication attractive. She'd seen too many investment managers who viewed elderly clients as easy marks, who pushed risky products or charged excessive fees. Michael seemed different. He seemed to actually care. It was this apparent integrity that had made Elena comfortable keeping their financial lives separate. She handled her own investments, mostly conservative index funds and treasury securities, while Michael managed a portfolio he described as more aggressive, higher return, appropriate for someone in the investment business. Elena never asked for details. She trusted Michael's expertise, and she was too busy with her own cases to micromanage investments that were performing well. That trust, Elena was beginning to realize, might have been the most expensive mistake of her professional life. Now, sitting in her car in the hospital parking garage, Elena watched Michael through the windshield as he paced near the building entrance, phone pressed to his ear. Even from 50 feet away, she could see the tension in his body language, the way he kept glancing around as if checking for surveillance. She knew that look. She'd seen it on the faces of subjects under federal investigation, people who'd spent so long living lies that they'd forgotten how to act normal when the pressure mounted. Elena Vasquez, the woman who'd built her career on detecting financial fraud, was about to discover that she'd been living with a master criminal for 8 years, and her cancer diagnosis, the worst news of her life, was about to become the catalyst for exposing the biggest case of her career. The morning after her diagnosis, Elena sat in her home office with 3 cups of coffee and a growing sense of dread that had nothing to do with cancer. She'd barely slept, not because of fear about her health, though that was certainly present, but because of something she'd seen on Michael's phone during the doctor's appointment. Numbers. Lots of them. Moving fast. In patterns that didn't look like normal investment management. Elena had spent 15 years training her brain to spot anomalies, and what she'd glimpsed on Michael's screen had triggered every professional alarm she possessed. The interface looked sophisticated, more like a trading platform than client portfolio management software. And the amounts, even in her brief glimpse, had seemed enormous. She started with what she knew, which was surprisingly little. Their finances had been separate by mutual agreement, but Elena realized she'd never actually verified the extent of that separation. She pulled up their joint checking account, used only for household expenses, and began tracing the flow of money. Michael contributed $800,000 monthly to cover mortgage utilities, groceries, and miscellaneous expenses. The amount had never varied in 8 years, which itself was suspicious. Elena's forensic training had taught her that legitimate income fluctuated. Bonuses varied. Investment returns went up and down. Only artificial income streams remained perfectly consistent. She accessed their mortgage documents, something she hadn't looked at since they'd refinanced 3 years ago. That's when she found the first real anomaly. Their home was listed as collateral for a business line of credit in the amount of $2.3 million. Elena had never signed authorization for this arrangement. Her hands trembled slightly as she logged into her personal credit monitoring service. 3 credit cards she'd never opened. 2 personal loans she'd never applied for. A business credit line with her name as co-guarantor for something called Chenvas Holdings, LLC. A company she'd never heard of. Elena's professional instincts kicked into overdrive. She opened a new browser window and began searching corporate records. Chenvas Holdings was registered in Delaware, as were 17 other entities with variations of their names: Chen Vasquez Capital, CVH Management Vasquez, Chen Investments. All listed her as either an officer or guarantor. All apparently created without her knowledge or consent. The pattern was becoming clear, and it was terrifying. Someone had been using her identity, her credit, her reputation to establish a network of corporate entities. Given that she shared financial records with only one person, the someone wasn't mysterious. Elena pulled up her personal investment accounts, the conservative index funds and treasury securities she'd been contributing to for 15 years. Her blood pressure spiked as she reviewed the statements. According to the records, she'd been making much more aggressive investments than she remembered. Her portfolio included positions in companies she'd never heard of, hedge funds she'd never researched, and something called alternative investment vehicles that sounded like exactly the kind of complex financial instruments she'd spent her career investigating. But here was the truly frightening part: her investment returns were too good. Consistently impossibly good. In 15 years of portfolio management, Elena had never seen legitimate returns this steady. Market volatility was a fact of life, except apparently in her own account. She grabbed her phone and called her investment advisor, Janet Morrison, a woman she'd worked with for over a decade. "Elena, how nice to hear from you. I was just reviewing your portfolio performance, another stellar quarter." "Janet, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Have you been executing trades I didn't authorize?" Long pause. "Elena, what do you mean?" "All your trades come through Michael. You set up that power of attorney arrangement years ago." Elena's office felt like it was tilting. "What power of attorney arrangement?" "The one you signed in 2019. Michael handles all your investment decisions now. He said you were too busy with work to manage the day-to-day trading, and honestly, Elena, he's been brilliant. Your returns have been phenomenal." Elena hung up without saying goodbye. She was already pulling up her filing cabinet, searching for documents she was now terrified to find. In the back of the bottom drawer behind tax returns and insurance policies, she found a folder labeled Investment Management in Michael's handwriting. Inside were dozens of documents with her signature. Power of attorney forms, investment authorization agreements, corporate formation papers. And most damning of all, a series of SEC compliance forms indicating that Elena Vasquez was the primary portfolio manager for Chen & Associates' Alternative Investment Division. Elena stared at her own signature on documents she'd never seen before. The signatures looked genuine. Michael must have obtained samples and practiced, or perhaps hired someone skilled in forgery. But the content was devastating. According to these documents, Elena was not just Michael's wife. She was his business partner in managing over $800 million in client funds. The problem was, Elena had never managed a single client dollar for Chen & Associates. She'd never even visited Michael's office in any professional capacity. Yet here was documentation suggesting she was the architect of the firm's entire alternative investment strategy. Elena's phone rang. Michael. "Hey, honey. How are you feeling today? I was thinking we should talk about taking some time off work. Focus on your health. Let me handle the financial stress." Elena watched herself in the reflection of her computer monitor. Her face looked calm, professional. Inside, she was screaming. "That's thoughtful, Michael. Actually, I was just reviewing some of our financial arrangements. I had a question about the investment advisory work I've apparently been doing for your firm." Dead silence. "I'm not sure what you mean," Michael said finally. "The Alternative Investment Division, the $800 million in client funds, the SEC compliance forms with my signature. Ring any bells?" Another pause, longer this time. Elena could practically hear Michael's mind racing, calculating options, developing explanations. "Oh, that. Elena, you're sick. You're stressed. Maybe we should talk about this when you're feeling better." "I'm feeling fine, Michael. In fact, I'm feeling more clear-headed than I have in years. So let's talk about it now. When exactly did I become a portfolio manager for your firm?" "Elena, you're not thinking clearly. The cancer diagnosis. The stress, it's affecting your judgment. Why don't you rest and we'll sort everything out later?" Elena hung up. She sat in her office surrounded by evidence of what appeared to be the most sophisticated identity theft and financial fraud she'd ever encountered. And the perpetrator was sleeping in her bed every night. She opened a new spreadsheet and began documenting everything systematically. If there was one thing Elena Vasquez knew how to do, it was build an airtight financial fraud case. She'd just never imagined she'd be building one against her own husband. Her phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Coming home early. We need to talk." Elena looked at the evidence spread across her desk, then at her reflection in the computer monitor. The woman staring back at her was no longer just a cancer patient worried about her health. She was a forensic accountant who'd just discovered she was living with a criminal. And Elena Vasquez had never lost a case. Michael arrived home 30 minutes later, moving with the forced casualness of someone trying very hard to appear normal. Elena watched from her office window as he sat in his BMW for nearly 5 minutes, phone pressed to his ear before finally coming inside. "Elena, where are you, honey?" "Office," she called back, not moving from her desk. She'd spent the intervening time organizing evidence and making copies of everything, storing backup files in cloud accounts Michael couldn't access. Michael appeared in her doorway looking like a man who'd aged 5 years in the past few hours. His usually immaculate appearance was disheveled. Tie-loosened hair mussed a fine sheen of perspiration on his forehead despite the October chill. "We need to talk," he said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "Yes, we do." Elena folded her hands in the same position she used during hostile witness interviews. "Let's start with why my name is on SEC compliance documents for investment activities I've never performed." Michael ran his hands through his hair, a gesture she'd never seen him make before. "Elena, this is more complicated than you understand. Yes, your name is on some business documents. It was for tax purposes, liability protection. Completely legal. Completely legal requires my knowledge and consent, Michael, neither of which I gave. You did give consent. You just don't remember. You were busy with that Hartford pension case, and I explained the benefits of having a forensic accountant as a business partner. You agreed it made sense." Elena stared at him with the expression she reserved for suspects who thought they were smarter than federal investigators. "Michael, I have eidetic memory for financial documents. It's literally what I do for a living. I would remember signing papers making me responsible for $800 million in client funds." Michael's composure cracked slightly. "The amounts might be overstated in some of those documents. For insurance purposes." "Insurance purposes. Yes. Higher coverage requires higher stated assets under management." Elena opened her laptop and pulled up the SEC database. "Let's check your firm's regulatory filings, shall we?" Her fingers flew across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. According to the SEC, Chen and Associates currently manages $2.1 billion in client assets. The alternative investment division, managed by Elena Vasquez, accounts for $847 million of that total. She turned the screen toward Michael. "That's not overstated for insurance, Michael. That's what you've reported to federal regulators. With my name as the responsible party." Michael was quiet for a long moment, staring at the computer screen. When he looked up, something had changed in his expression. The panic was gone, replaced by a cold calculation that Elena had never seen before. "Elena, I need you to understand something. Your name isn't just on those documents as a formality. If anything goes wrong with the investments, if there are any regulatory issues, you're legally responsible. Your forensic accounting expertise, your SEC credentials, they made you the perfect person to structure complex investment vehicles." Elena felt ice forming in her stomach. "What kind of regulatory issues?" "The kind that result in federal prosecution for securities fraud." The words hung between them like a blade. Elena realized she was looking at a stranger. Not the man she'd married, not the ethical investment manager she'd fallen in love with, but someone who'd spent 8 years positioning her as a fall guy for crimes she didn't even know were being committed. "How much, Michael? How much money are we talking about?" Michael stood up and walked to her window, looking out at their quiet street. "The specific amounts are less important than the structure of the investments. Some of our clients wanted higher returns than traditional portfolios could provide. We accommodated those requests through alternative vehicles." "That's not an answer." $400 million. Elena's vision actually blurred for a moment. $400 million in what? High-yield investment programs, private placement securities, structured products. Elena had prosecuted enough financial crimes to know exactly what those terms meant when strung together in that order. "You're running a Ponzi scheme." Michael turned back to face her. "I'm providing sophisticated investors with returns commensurate with their risk tolerance. Using new investor money to pay fake returns to existing investors. That's the textbook definition of a Ponzi scheme, Michael. The returns aren't fake. They're backed by legitimate investment strategies developed by Elena Vasquez, one of the SEC's most respected forensic accountants. At least that's what the documentation shows." Elena realized the full scope of what Michael had done. He hadn't just forged her signature on a few documents. He'd created an entire fictional version of her professional life, one where she was the criminal mastermind behind a sophisticated fraud scheme. "If this collapses," she said slowly, "I'm the one who goes to federal prison." "It's not going to collapse." But yes, if it did, the evidence would point to you as the architect. I'm just the guy who trusted his brilliant wife's investment strategies. Elena looked at this man she'd shared a bed with for 8 years. This person she'd trusted with her life and realized she'd been living with a sociopath. Worse, she'd been living with a sociopath who was much smarter than she'd given him credit for. The cancer diagnosis, she said suddenly. You want me to step back from work, focus on my health. You're planning to liquidate everything while I'm incapacitated. Michael's expression didn't change, which was confirmation enough. If I die from cancer, or if the stress kills me, you're free and clear with whatever money you can move offshore. If I survive, I'm too compromised by my illness to mount an effective defense when federal investigators come calling. Elena, you're being paranoid. The cancer diagnosis is stressful, but get out. What? Elena stood up, her voice taking on the authority she used in federal courtrooms. Get out of my office, get out of my house, and get yourself a criminal defense attorney because I'm about to do what I do best. Elena, you need to think about this carefully. If you make any moves against the business, you'll be destroying yourself too. Michael, you made one critical error in your planning. What's that? Elena smiled with the expression of someone who'd just figured out how to win an unwinnable game. You forgot that I'm the best forensic accountant in the country. I don't just investigate financial fraud, I dismantle it. And I've never ever lost a case. Michael left that evening with a single suitcase and the kind of controlled urgency Elena recognized from her years investigating white-collar criminals. He'd kissed her forehead before walking out, a gesture so grotesquely normal after their conversation that Elena had to grip her desk to keep from laughing hysterically. I'll stay at the firm's corporate housing until you're feeling better, he'd said, still maintaining the fiction that she was too sick to think clearly. Take care of yourself, Elena. Focus on getting healthy. The subtext was clear. Stay quiet, stay compliant, and maybe they could both survive this. Elena waited exactly 10 minutes after his BMW disappeared down their street before making her first move. She called her sister, Dr. Sarah Kim, an elder law attorney who specialized in financial abuse cases. Elena, how did the appointment go yesterday? Sarah, I need your help. Not as family, as a lawyer. What's wrong? I think my husband has been running a Ponzi scheme using my identity. I need to know how to protect myself while building a case against him. Silence. Then, I'm driving up from the city, don't touch anything, don't talk to anyone, and don't let Michael back in the house. Next, Elena called Agent Marcus Torres at the FBI's white-collar crime division. She'd worked with Torres on 3 major fraud cases, and he owed her several favors. Elena Vasquez, I should have known you'd surface eventually. How's retirement treating you? I'm not retired, Marcus, and I need to discuss something that can't go through official channels yet. This sounds interesting and probably illegal. Tomorrow morning, my house. And Marcus brings someone from SEC enforcement. This is big. Elena's final call was to Rebecca Foster, the Wall Street Journal's financial crimes reporter. Foster had built her career on exposing investment fraud, and Elena had been her source on several high-profile cases. Elena, please tell me you're calling with another story. It's been too quiet lately. Rebecca, how would you like exclusive access to the biggest Ponzi scheme investigation since Madoff? I'd say you have my attention. Good, because I'm about to take down a $400 million fraud ring, and I'm going to need media pressure to make sure the right people end up in federal prison. Elena hung up and looked around her office. The awards, the newspaper clippings, the evidence of 15 years spent putting financial criminals behind bars. Tomorrow she would begin the most important case of her career. Michael Chen thought he'd been clever positioning Elena as the fall guy for his crimes. He'd counted on her cancer diagnosis to keep her distracted and compliant. He'd assumed that even if she discovered the truth, she'd be too compromised to fight back effectively. Michael had made a fundamental miscalculation. Elena Vasquez wasn't just a forensic accountant. She was a forensic accountant with cancer, which meant she had nothing left to lose and every motivation to ensure that justice was served before her time ran out. The hunter had just become the hunted. And Elena Vasquez had never missed her target. Sarah Kim arrived at Elena's Greenwich home at 6:47 a.m., carrying 2 large coffee cups and the kind of focused intensity that Elena remembered from their law school days at Yale. Sarah had built her practice around protecting elderly clients from financial predators, and she'd developed an almost supernatural ability to spot sophisticated fraud schemes. "Show me everything," Sarah said without preamble, settling into Elena's home office like a general preparing for war. Elena spread the documents across her desk. The forged power of attorney forms the SEC compliance filings, the corporate formation papers for entities she'd never heard of. Sarah reviewed each document with the methodical precision of someone who'd seen every variation of financial elder abuse. "This is sophisticated," Sarah said after 20 minutes of silent analysis. "Whoever did this understands both SEC regulations and identity theft law. They've created a framework where you appear to be the architect of whatever criminal enterprise they're running." "Michael's been planning this for years," Elena replied. "The question is whether I can prove it before federal investigators decide I'm the mastermind." Sarah pulled out her phone. "I'm calling someone you need to meet. David Park, cybersecurity expert, former NSA. He specializes in digital forensics for financial crimes. If Michael's been forging documents and creating false digital trails, David can prove it." While Sarah made arrangements, Elena prepared for her 9 a.m. meeting with Agent Marcus Torres. She'd worked with Torres on 3 major fraud investigations, including the notorious Greenwich grandmother case that had made national headlines. Torres understood the complexities of investment fraud, and more importantly, he trusted Elena's analytical abilities. Agent Torres arrived precisely on time, accompanied by SEC enforcement attorney Lisa Chen. No relation to Michael, despite the shared surname. Lisa specialized in Ponzi scheme prosecutions and had an impressive track record of recovering assets for defrauded investors. "Elena," Torres said, settling into her living room, "when you called yesterday, you mentioned a $400 million fraud scheme. That number tends to get our attention." Elena handed each of them a bound folder containing her preliminary analysis. Chen & Associates is operating a classic Ponzi scheme using new investor funds to pay fake returns to existing clients. The total amount at risk is approximately $847 million based on their SEC filings. Lisa Chen looked up from the documents, her expression grave. "And you believe your husband has positioned you as the responsible party?" "I believe my husband has spent 8 years creating a false identity for me as a criminal mastermind. Look at page 12. SEC compliance forms indicating that I've been managing the firm's alternative investment division since 2019. I've never set foot in their offices in a professional capacity." Torres reviewed the evidence with the systematic approach Elena had seen him use in dozens of investigations. "The signature analysis alone won't be sufficient. We'll need digital evidence communication records, proof that you weren't involved in the day-to-day operations." "That's where David Park comes in," Sarah interjected. "He's meeting us here this afternoon to begin digital forensics analysis." Lisa Chen closed her folder and looked directly at Elena. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Is there any possibility that you were involved in these activities and simply don't remember due to stress or illness?" Elena met her gaze steadily. "Lisa, I have eidetic memory for financial documents and mathematical analysis. It's the foundation of my entire career. If I had structured an $847 million investment scheme, I would remember every detail of every transaction." "Fair enough. But Elena, you need to understand the position you're in. If we investigate Chen & Associates and find evidence of fraud, you're currently listed as the person responsible for the fraudulent activities. We'll need overwhelming evidence of your innocence before we can move forward." Torres nodded agreement. "Elena, we've worked together for years. I trust your integrity completely. But a federal prosecutor looking at these documents won't have that history. They'll see a brilliant forensic accountant who got greedy and used her expertise to defraud investors." Elena had expected this reaction, but hearing it articulated made the reality sink in. Michael hadn't just stolen her identity. He'd weaponized her reputation and expertise against her. "What do you need from me?" she asked. "Everything," Lisa replied. "Every communication with Michael about business matters. Every document you've ever signed. Every conversation you can remember about his work. We need to build a timeline proving you had no knowledge of or involvement in the fraudulent activities." Sarah leaned forward. "There's another angle we need to consider. Elena was just diagnosed with breast cancer. The timing isn't coincidental. If Michael's been planning to liquidate the scheme, Elena's illness provides perfect cover. Torres made a note. Explain that. Think about it. Elena said, the pattern becoming clear as she spoke. I'm diagnosed with cancer. I take medical leave from the SEC. I'm distracted by treatment and potentially incapacitated. Michael has power of attorney over my finances. He could liquidate everything disappeared to a non-extradition country and leave me to face federal prosecutors while I'm fighting for my life. Lisa Chen's expression hardened. That's sociopathic. That's profitable, Sarah corrected grimly. And it's exactly the kind of calculated manipulation we see in financial abuse cases. Torres stood up. Elena, I'm going to be direct with you. This investigation could take months, possibly years. Are you prepared for that level of stress while you're undergoing cancer treatment? Elena looked around her office at the awards and commendations that represented 15 years of fighting financial criminals. Marcus, I've spent my entire career putting people like Michael in federal prison. I'm not about to let him destroy me just because I have cancer. All right then, Torres said with a slight smile. Let's destroy him first. David Park arrived that afternoon looking exactly like Elena's mental image of a former NSA analyst, unassuming appearance that masked formidable technical expertise. He set up his equipment in Elena's office with the efficiency of someone who'd conducted hundreds of digital forensics investigations. Sarah explained the situation. He said, connecting his laptop to Elena's home network. We're looking for evidence that someone else has been using your digital identity to conduct business activities you weren't aware of. What exactly can you detect? Elena asked. Login patterns, IP address analysis, keystroke analysis if we're lucky. If Michael's been accessing accounts in your name or if he's been creating documents with forged digital signatures, I can prove it. David's fingers flew across his keyboard with the same intensity Elena brought to financial analysis. Elena, I need you to walk me through your normal computer usage patterns. What accounts do you access regularly? What software do you use? When do you typically work from home versus the office? Elena provided detailed information about her digital habits while David mapped her legitimate online activities. After 2 hours of analysis, he looked up with the expression of someone who'd found exactly what he'd hoped to find. Elena, someone has been systematically accessing accounts in your name from locations you've never been to at times when you can prove you were elsewhere. More importantly, they've been using sophisticated software to forge your digital signatures on documents you've never seen. Can you prove it wasn't me? David turned his laptop screen toward her. See these login records for your investment advisory accounts? Someone accessed them from Chen & Associates offices at 3:47 a.m. on 15 different occasions over the past 2 years. Security camera records from your SEC office show you were working late on those exact dates physically present in Hartford while someone else was conducting business in your name in Greenwich. Elena felt the first surge of genuine hope since discovering Michael's crimes. That's alibis for 15 separate incidents of identity theft. It gets better, David continued. The software being used to forge your digital signatures has a unique algorithmic fingerprint. I can trace it to a specific vendor that specializes in identity management solutions for high-end financial fraud. Sarah was taking notes rapidly. David, how quickly can you prepare a forensic report documenting all of this? 72 hours, but Elena, there's something else you need to know. The activity patterns suggest this has been going on much longer than you realize. I'm seeing evidence of identity theft dating back to 2016. Elena felt sick. 2 years before we got married. Michael's been planning this for nearly a decade, Sarah said grimly. Elena, this wasn't a crime of opportunity. This was a long-term strategy to position you as a criminal co-conspirator. Elena looked at the evidence accumulating on her desk, the digital proof that her marriage had been a lie from the beginning. Michael hadn't fallen in love with her. He'd targeted her for her credentials, her reputation, and her potential usefulness as a fall guy. But Michael had made one critical error in his planning. He'd assumed that Elena would be too distracted by cancer, too emotionally devastated by betrayal, and too legally compromised to fight back effectively. Michael Chen was about to learn that he'd just declared war on the most dangerous opponent he could have chosen, a brilliant forensic accountant with nothing left to lose and every resource necessary to destroy him completely. Elena's systematic dismantling of Michael's criminal empire began at 4:30 a.m. the following morning. Cancer had disrupted her sleep schedule anyway, and she discovered that her mind was sharpest in the pre-dawn hours when the world was quiet and her analytical abilities could operate without distraction. She established a war room in her home office, converting her dining room table into a command center for what would become the most complex financial investigation of her career. 3 computer monitors displayed different aspects of the growing case: client records, financial transfers, and regulatory filings. A 4th screen showed real-time monitoring of accounts Michael didn't know she could access. David Park had installed sophisticated tracking software that would alert Elena whenever someone accessed accounts in her name. Within the first 6 hours of monitoring, she documented 12 separate instances of Michael conducting business using her digital identity. "He's not even trying to hide it anymore," Elena told Sarah during their daily morning call. "David's software is capturing everything. Emails sent in my name, investment authorizations I never approved, client communications discussing strategies I never developed." Elena's first major breakthrough came from analyzing Chen & Associates' client list. Using her SEC access credentials, which remained valid during her medical leave, she cross-referenced the firm's reported client base with actual investment account records. The discrepancies were staggering, saying. Chen & Associates claimed to manage investments for 847 high-net-worth clients with a total portfolio value of $2.1 billion. Elena's analysis revealed that only 312 clients actually existed, and their legitimate investments totaled approximately $400 million. The remaining $1.7 billion in assets under management existed only on paper. Elena mapped the flow of money with the same methodical precision she'd used to dismantle international money laundering operations. New client investments went directly into operational accounts that Michael controlled. A portion was used to pay fake returns to existing clients, while the majority disappeared into a labyrinth of offshore accounts and shell companies. The sophistication of Michael's scheme was genuinely impressive. He'd created multiple layers of legitimacy: actual investment products that generated modest returns, real client relationships that provided testimonials and referrals, and carefully constructed financial statements that would satisfy casual regulatory review. But Elena wasn't conducting casual review. She was performing the kind of deep forensic analysis that had made her reputation at the SEC. Elena's breakthrough came when she discovered Michael's insurance policy, a detailed digital ledger, tracking every fraudulent transaction, every fake client account, and every dollar stolen from legitimate investors. Michael had been keeping meticulous records of his crimes, presumably to facilitate rapid liquidation, when the scheme inevitably collapsed. "Why would he document everything so thoroughly?" Sarah asked during one of their evening strategy sessions. "Control," Elena replied, studying Michael's digital records. Ponzi schemes collapse when the operator loses track of the money flow. Michael's been maintaining detailed records to ensure he could liquidate efficiently when the time came. Elena discovered that Michael's exit strategy was already in motion. He'd been gradually moving money out of client accounts and into offshore vehicles that would be difficult for federal investigators to trace. The pace of these transfers had accelerated dramatically in the past 6 months, well before Elena's cancer diagnosis. The cancer didn't trigger his exit strategy, Elena realized during a late-night analysis session. He'd already decided to collapse the scheme. "My illness just provided convenient cover." Elena's investigation revealed the true scope of Michael's crimes extended far beyond simple Ponzi scheme mechanics. He'd been systematically targeting elderly clients who were particularly vulnerable to financial manipulation. She found recorded phone conversations where Michael used Elena's credentials to convince clients to make risky investments. "My wife is Elena Vasquez from the SEC," he would say. "She's designed some exclusive investment vehicles for qualified clients." Elena listened to hours of these recordings, her disgust growing with each conversation. Michael wasn't just stealing money. He was exploiting her reputation to defraud people who trusted her professional integrity. The emotional impact was devastating, but Elena channeled her anger into analytical precision. She documented every client contact, every fraudulent representation, every dollar stolen using her name and credentials. Elena's most damning discovery came from Michael's email communications with co-conspirators. She found detailed discussions about managing the Elena problem that dated back to 2020s. Elena's getting too close to the investment side of things, Michael had written to someone identified only as JP. We need to create more separation between her work and our activities. The response was chilling. Have you considered the medical angle create a health crisis that would incapacitate her during the liquidation phase? Elena stared at the email exchange, trying to process the implication. Had Michael somehow caused her cancer? Was her illness part of his criminal strategy? She spent 3 days researching the question, consulting with oncologists and toxicology experts. The conclusion was that Michael couldn't have deliberately caused her specific type of breast cancer. But the timing of his liquidation strategy and her diagnosis was undeniably convenient for his purposes. Elena documented Michael's communications with his co-conspirators, mapping a network of individuals who'd helped him operate the scheme. JP was identified as James Patterson Michael's brother-in-law, who ran a series of shell companies that laundered stolen funds. AR was Angela Rodriguez, a former SEC compliance officer who'd been providing inside information about regulatory investigations. The corruption extended deeper than Elena had imagined. Michael hadn't just created a Ponzi scheme. He'd built a criminal organization that included corrupt government officials, complicit family members, and professional enablers. Elena's investigation revealed that Michael's crimes had evolved over time. What started as relatively small-scale investment fraud had grown into a sophisticated operation that included money laundering, regulatory corruption, and systematic identity theft. She found evidence that Michael had been using her SEC credentials to gain advance warning of regulatory investigations. He'd been selling this information to other investment managers who were running their own fraudulent schemes. Elena, Sarah said after reviewing the latest evidence, this isn't just about Michael's Ponzi scheme anymore. You've uncovered a network of financial crimes that could implicate dozens of people. Elena nodded grimly. Which means dozens of people have motivation to ensure I don't survive to testify against them. As Elena's investigation deepened, she began receiving anonymous threats. Someone left dead flowers on her doorstep. Her home security system detected unauthorized attempts to access her property. Strange cars appeared in her neighborhood at unusual hours. Michael's getting desperate, Agent Torres warned during one of their daily briefings. Desperate people make dangerous decisions. Elena installed additional security measures and began varying her daily routines, but she refused to slow down her investigation. Every day brought new evidence of Michael's crimes, and Elena was methodically building the kind of comprehensive case that would ensure maximum federal prosecution. Elena's systematic approach was revealing the full scope of Michael's criminal enterprise. She'd identified 847 victims who'd lost approximately $400 million to various fraudulent investment schemes. She'd traced money flows through 17 different countries and 43 shell companies. She'd documented corruption involving federal regulators, state officials, and multiple financial institutions. But Elena's most important discovery was still to come. As she dug deeper into Michael's digital records, she found evidence of crimes that extended far beyond financial fraud. Michael's criminal organization had been willing to use violence and intimidation to protect their operation. Elena was about to discover that she wasn't just investigating financial crimes. She was exposing a criminal conspiracy that had already resulted in at least 3 suspicious deaths of potential witnesses. Elena's investigation took a darker turn when she discovered Michael's communications about problem clients, investors who'd begun asking difficult questions about their returns or demanding detailed account statements. The first suspicious death was Harold Morrison, a retired pharmaceutical executive who'd invested $2.3 million with Chen and Associates. Morrison had been demanding a complete audit of his account when he died in what appeared to be a home invasion robbery. Nothing was stolen except his computer and investment files. Elena found email exchanges between Michael and James Patterson discussing the Morrison situation, just days before the elderly man's death. Harold's becoming a real problem, Michael had written. He's threatening to contact the SEC directly. We need a permanent solution. Patterson's response was coded but clear. Leave it to me. These things happen to elderly people all the time. Elena's blood ran cold as she read the correspondence. Morrison's death hadn't been a random crime. It had been murder designed to protect Michael's scheme. She researched two other suspicious deaths: Margaret Chen, no relation to Michael, a retired teacher who'd lost her pension savings, and Robert Taylor, a widower who discovered his late wife's investments were worthless. All three deaths shared disturbing similarities. All three victims had been demanding account audits or threatening regulatory complaints. All three had died in apparent accidents or crimes that eliminated their ability to expose the fraud. Elena realized she wasn't just investigating financial crimes. She was documenting a criminal conspiracy that included murder. She called Agent Torres immediately. "Marcus, I need to meet with homicide detectives from Greenwich PD and the Connecticut State Police. Michael's organization has been killing witnesses." Torres was quiet for a long moment. "Elena, that's a serious accusation. Are you certain?" "I have email evidence showing Michael and his co-conspirators discussing permanent solutions for problematic clients. 3 investors who were demanding audits died under suspicious circumstances within weeks of their complaints." "Send me everything you have. I'm escalating this to the FBI's Organized Crime Task Force." Elena's investigation had evolved from financial fraud to racketeering and murder. She was no longer just trying to clear her name. She was building a case against a criminal organization that had killed to protect their operation. The realization that Michael was capable of murder changed Elena's entire approach to the investigation. She was no longer dealing with a white-collar criminal who'd gotten greedy. She was investigating a sociopath who'd been willing to kill elderly victims to protect his scheme. Elena's security concerns intensified when she discovered that her name appeared on Michael's problem list, along with the 3 deceased investors. "Elena is becoming a serious threat," Michael had written to Patterson just 2 days after her cancer diagnosis. "She has the expertise to unravel everything we've built. We need to consider extreme measures." Patterson's response was terrifying. Medical complications during cancer treatment. Very believable. Very tragic. Elena realized that Michael hadn't just planned to frame her for financial crimes. He'd been planning to kill her. Her cancer diagnosis had provided the perfect cover for murder that would appear to be natural causes. Elena immediately shared this discovery with Agent Torres and arranged for FBI protection. She also made arrangements with David Park to ensure that all evidence would be automatically transmitted to federal authorities if anything happened to her. "Elena," Sarah said during an emergency strategy session, "you need to consider witness protection. These people have already killed 3 times. They won't hesitate to kill again." Elena looked at the evidence spread across her dining room table. Hundreds of documents proving Michael's crimes, digital records of his communications, and now evidence of murder. She'd spent 2 weeks building the most comprehensive financial fraud case of her career. "I'm not running," Elena said firmly. "Michael made the mistake of thinking cancer would make me weak and compliant. He's about to learn that cancer just made me more determined to see justice served." Elena's investigation had revealed that Michael's criminal organization was much larger and more dangerous than anyone had realized. But Elena had something Michael didn't expect: the analytical skills to unravel his entire operation, and the determination to see it through regardless of personal cost. The forensic accountant was about to become the key witness in a federal racketeering case that would dismantle one of the most sophisticated criminal organizations in Connecticut's history. Michael Chen had spent years positioning Elena as his fall guy. Instead, Elena Vasquez was about to become his destroyer. Elena's investigation into the suspicious deaths led her down a rabbit hole that revealed the true scope of Michael's criminal enterprise. What she'd initially assumed was a relatively sophisticated Ponzi scheme was actually the financial arm of a much larger criminal organization. Working with Agent Torres and the FBI's Organized Crime Task Force, Elena discovered that Chen and Associates was laundering money for multiple criminal enterprises. Drug trafficking proceeds from New York, human trafficking operations along the I-95 corridor, even proceeds from illegal arms sales to international buyers. "Elena," Agent Torres said during a secure briefing at the FBI's New Haven field office, "you've uncovered one of the largest money laundering operations we've seen on the East Coast. Michael wasn't just running a Ponzi scheme. He was providing financial services to organized crime." Elena reviewed the evidence with growing horror. Bank records showed massive cash deposits that had been converted into seemingly legitimate investment returns. Wire transfers from known criminal organizations had been processed through accounts bearing her forged signatures. How long has this been going on? Elena asked. Based on your analysis, at least 6 years. Possibly longer. Elena realized that her marriage to Michael hadn't just been a cover for investment fraud. It had been a cover for his role as a financial facilitator for multiple criminal organizations. Her credentials, her reputation, her access to federal databases had all been tools in Michael's criminal arsenal. The investigation revealed that Michael's organization had been using Elena's SEC access to identify potential targets for various crimes. Wealthy retirees who'd been flagged for investment fraud, government officials who might be susceptible to corruption, even potential witnesses in federal investigations who needed to be silenced. Elena found communications showing that Michael had been selling information from her SEC cases to criminal organizations, details about ongoing investigations, names of cooperating witnesses, intelligence about federal enforcement priorities. Elena, Lisa Chen said during a joint briefing with SEC enforcement, Michael's been using your credentials to commit espionage against federal law enforcement. This is beyond financial fraud. This is a national security issue. Elena's personal violation deepened with each new revelation. Michael hadn't just stolen her identity for financial gain. He'd weaponized her entire professional career against the justice system she'd dedicated her life to serving. The investigation revealed that Michael's exit strategy had been in development for over 2 years. He'd been systematically moving money out of the United States, establishing new identities in non-extradition countries, and preparing to disappear permanently. Elena found detailed plans for Michael's escape, including forged passports, offshore bank accounts, and safe houses in 3 different countries. The timeline showed that Michael had planned to liquidate everything and disappear within 6 months of Elena's cancer diagnosis. He was going to let me die in federal prison while he lived comfortably in Costa Rica, Elena told Sarah during one of their evening strategy sessions. Elena, he was planning to kill you himself. The prison scenario was just his backup plan. Elena's investigation revealed that Michael's organization had been planning to eliminate her as soon as she became more liability than asset. They'd identified several methods that would appear to be cancer-related complications, including introducing toxins that would accelerate her illness or cause treatment failures. We found communications with a corrupt oncology nurse, Agent Torres reported. She was being paid to provide information about your treatment schedule and access to your medical care. Elena felt sick. Even her cancer treatment had been infiltrated by Michael's criminal organization. There was literally no aspect of her life that hadn't been contaminated by his crimes. But Elena's most disturbing discovery came when she analyzed the pattern of Michael's targeting. He hadn't chosen his elderly victims randomly. He'd been systematically targeting the families of law enforcement officials, federal prosecutors, and regulatory investigators. It's insurance, Elena realized during a late-night analysis session. Michael's been defrauding the families of people who might investigate him. If anyone gets too close, he has leverage. Elena found evidence that Michael had stolen retirement savings from the widow of a federal judge, the pension funds of 3 retired FBI agents, and the college savings accounts of multiple prosecutor families. Elena, Agent Torres said grimly, Michael's been building a web of corruption and leverage that extends throughout federal law enforcement. This investigation is going to expose compromised officials at every level. Elena's systematic analysis revealed that Michael's organization had corrupted at least 12 federal employees, including SEC investigators, FBI agents, and federal prosecutors. They'd been providing inside information about investigations, warning targets about impending arrests, and even sabotaging cases that threatened the organization. The corruption goes all the way to the top, Elena told Sarah. Michael's been paying federal officials to protect his operation for years. Elena realized that her investigation wasn't just exposing financial crimes. It was revealing systematic corruption within federal law enforcement. The implications were staggering. Elena, Lisa Chen warned, some of the people you're exposing have the power to make evidence disappear, witnesses relocate, and investigations terminate. You're not just fighting Michael anymore. You're fighting a corrupt system that has every motivation to silence you. Elena understood that her investigation had evolved beyond personal vindication. She was now the key witness in what would become one of the largest federal corruption cases in recent history. But Elena had advantages that Michael's organization didn't anticipate. Her reputation within federal law enforcement was impeccable. Her analytical work was regarded as the gold standard for financial forensics. And her systematic approach to evidence gathering had created a case so comprehensive that no amount of corruption could make it disappear. Michael made one critical error, Elena told Agent Torres. He assumed that I'd be too scared, too sick, or too overwhelmed to fight back effectively. He forgot that I've spent 15 years building cases against people exactly like him. Elena's investigation had revealed that she wasn't just married to a criminal. She'd been living with the financial architect of one of the most sophisticated criminal organizations on the East Coast. But Elena had systematically documented every aspect of their operation with the kind of forensic precision that would ensure maximum prosecutions and maximum sentences. Michael Chen had spent years building a criminal empire using Elena's identity and expertise. Elena Vasquez was about to use those same analytical skills to destroy everything he'd built. Elena's investigation had grown beyond what any single person could manage, even someone with her expertise. She needed a team of specialists who could help her navigate the complex intersection of financial crimes, organized crime, and federal corruption. Agent Torres arranged for Elena to work with a joint task force that included representatives from the FBI's Organized Crime Division, the SEC's Enforcement Branch, the IRS Criminal Investigation Unit, and the Connecticut State Police's Major Crimes Division. The team assembled in a secure conference room at the FBI's New Haven field office. Elena looked around the table at faces she recognized from years of federal law enforcement work. People whose careers had been built on dismantling exactly the kind of criminal organization Michael had created. Ladies and gentlemen, Agent Torres began, Elena Vasquez has uncovered what may be the most sophisticated financial crimes organization we've seen on the East Coast. Elena, please brief the team on your findings. Elena activated the presentation she'd spent 3 days preparing. The scope of evidence was overwhelming. Financial records, communication intercepts, digital forensics, and documented connections to multiple criminal enterprises. Chen and Associates has been operating as a financial services provider for organized crime, Elena began. They've laundered approximately $800 million over 6 years, provided financial intelligence to criminal organizations, and eliminated witnesses who threatened their operation. Special Agent Maria Santos from the FBI's Organized Crime Division leaned forward. Elena, you mentioned eliminations. How many murders are we talking about? 3 confirmed, possibly more. Harold Morrison, Margaret Chen, and Robert Taylor, all elderly investors who were demanding account audits. All died under suspicious circumstances after threatening to contact federal authorities. IRS Criminal Investigation Supervisor James Wright reviewed Elena's financial analysis. The money laundering operation is incredibly sophisticated. They've been converting criminal proceeds into apparently legitimate investment returns, then moving clean money through international banking networks. Elena nodded. Michael's organization has been providing what amounts to a full-service criminal banking operation. Cash deposits, wire transfers, investment vehicles, offshore accounts, and even false documentation for tax purposes. Connecticut State Police Detective Lisa Rodriguez had been studying the murder evidence. Elena, the pattern of these deaths suggests professional execution. This isn't just financial crime. This is organized crime with significant operational capabilities. Elena activated her next slide showing Michael's organizational chart. The leadership includes Michael Chen as the primary operator, James Patterson as the money laundering coordinator, and Angela Rodriguez as the regulatory intelligence source. But there are at least 20 other individuals involved in various capacities. SEC enforcement attorney Lisa Chen reviewed the regulatory violations. Elena, the scope of securities fraud here is unprecedented. They've been operating unregistered investment vehicles, providing false information to regulatory authorities, and using insider information to manipulate markets. The securities fraud is just one component, Elena replied. They've been using my SEC credentials to gain access to federal databases, identify potential targets, and even sabotage ongoing investigations. Agent Santos looked up from her notes. Elena, you mentioned federal corruption. How extensive is the compromise? Elena felt the weight of what she was about to reveal. I've identified at least 12 federal employees who've been providing information to Michael's organization. SEC investigators, FBI agents, federal prosecutors, and regulatory officials. The room went quiet. Federal corruption cases were always sensitive, but corruption at this scale would send shockwaves through multiple agencies. Elena, Agent Torres said carefully, "These are serious accusations. Do you have documented evidence of the corruption?" Elena activated another slide showing intercepted communications. "I have emails, recorded phone conversations, and financial records showing payments to federal employees. Michael's organization has been paying for inside information, advance warning of investigations, and even case sabotage." Detective Rodriguez was taking detailed notes. "Elena, some of the people you're accusing have the power to terminate this investigation. How do we protect the evidence and ensure prosecutions proceed?" Elena had anticipated this concern. David Park has created a distributed evidence storage system. All evidence is automatically backed up to secure servers that are controlled by people outside federal law enforcement. If anything happens to me, or if the investigation is compromised, everything becomes public immediately. IRS Supervisor Wright smiled grimly. "Elena, you've essentially created a dead man's switch for one of the largest corruption cases in federal law enforcement history." "I've spent 15 years building cases against financial criminals," Elena replied. "I know how these people operate, and I know how they try to escape justice. This case is designed to be prosecution-proof." Agent Santos reviewed Elena's organizational analysis. "Elena, what's your assessment of the organization's current status? Are they aware of your investigation?" "Michael knows I've discovered his financial crimes. He doesn't know the full extent of my investigation into the murders and corruption. He's currently accelerating his exit strategy, which gives us a limited window to complete evidence gathering before he disappears." Elena activated her final slide showing Michael's escape timeline. "Based on his recent activities, I estimate we have approximately 2 weeks before Michael attempts to liquidate everything and leave the country." Agent Torres stood up. "Elena, what do you need from this task force?" Elena had prepared a detailed request list. "I need surveillance on all key organization members, financial freezing orders for domestic accounts, coordination with international law enforcement to freeze offshore assets, and protection for potential witnesses who might cooperate." "Elena," Lisa Chen asked, "what about your personal safety? These people have already killed 3 times, and you're the biggest threat to their operation." And Elena looked around the table at the law enforcement professionals who would help her bring Michael's organization to justice. "I've been living with a sociopathic criminal for 8 years while fighting cancer. At this point, federal witness protection sounds like a vacation." The task force spent the next 4 hours developing operational plans. Elena would continue her analytical work under FBI protection, while coordinated law enforcement actions dismantled Michael's organization piece by piece. "Elena," Agent Torres said as the meeting concluded, "you've built the most comprehensive financial crimes case I've seen in 20 years. Michael's organization won't survive what you've uncovered." Elena gathered her evidence files, thinking about the 8 years of lies and manipulation that had brought her to this moment. Michael thought marrying a forensic accountant would provide him with perfect cover for his crimes. He never considered that the same analytical skills he was exploiting could be turned against him. As Elena left the FBI field office with her security detail, she realized that she'd assembled exactly the kind of law enforcement team necessary to dismantle Michael's criminal empire. The hunter had become the hunted, and Elena Vasquez never missed her target. Elena's systematic investigation had been proceeding flawlessly until she discovered evidence that shattered her remaining faith in the people closest to her. The betrayal came from a source she'd never suspected: her own sister Sarah. Elena found the evidence during a routine analysis of Michael's communication records. Hidden among hundreds of business-related emails was a thread that made her blood run cold. Michael had been corresponding with someone identified as SK, Sarah Kim. Elena stared at her computer screen, hoping she'd misinterpreted the evidence, but the pattern was unmistakable. Sarah had been providing Michael with detailed information about Elena's investigation from the very beginning. The email thread dated back to 3 days after Elena's cancer diagnosis, when she'd first contacted Sarah for legal advice. "Elena's getting suspicious about the financial arrangements," Sarah had written to Michael. "She's asking questions about power of attorney documents and SEC filings. I'm going to recommend she focus on her health and let you handle the financial stress." Michael's response was chilling. Perfect. Keep encouraging her to step back from work. The medical situation provides excellent cover for asset liquidation. Elena scrolled through weeks of communications watching her sister systematically betray every confidence she'd shared. Sarah had reported Elena's discovery of the forged documents, her decision to investigate Chen and Associates, and even her plans to contact federal authorities. Elena's building a comprehensive case against you, Sarah had written just 2 days earlier. She's identified the money laundering operation and the suspicious client deaths. You need to accelerate your exit strategy immediately. Elena realized that Michael had known about every aspect of her investigation because Sarah had been feeding him intelligence. The criminal organization hadn't been reacting to Elena's discoveries. They'd been anticipating them. Elena's hands shook as she read Sarah's most recent communication. Elena's scheduled to meet with the FBI task force tomorrow. She's prepared evidence packages that will implicate dozens of people. If you're going to eliminate the problem permanently, this is your last opportunity. Elena felt physically sick. Her own sister was encouraging Michael to murder her. Elena scrolled back through the communications, trying to understand when Sarah's betrayal had begun. The earliest email in the thread was dated 18 months earlier, long before Elena's cancer diagnosis, long before she'd discovered Michael's crimes. The Elena situation is becoming problematic, Michael had written. She's getting too close to some of our client relationships. We need better intelligence about her SEC activities. Sarah's response revealed the depth of her betrayal. I can monitor her personal communications and provide advance warning about any federal investigations that might affect your operations. But this arrangement needs to be more profitable for me. Elena found bank records showing payments from Michael to Sarah totaling over $300,000 during the past 18 months. Sarah hadn't just been betraying Elena's trust, she'd been profiting from it. Elena realized that Sarah's encouragement to investigate Michael's crimes had been a setup. Sarah had been guiding Elena toward discoveries that Michael's organization was prepared to handle while steering her away from evidence that might be truly damaging. Elena's most painful discovery came when she found communications showing that Sarah had helped plan the identity theft that had made Elena appear responsible for Michael's crimes. Elena's reputation and credentials are our most valuable assets, Sarah had written. If we can position her as the architect of the investment strategies, she becomes the perfect fall guy if anything goes wrong. Elena read through detailed discussions between Sarah and Michael about how to manipulate Elena's trust, exploit her illness, and ultimately eliminate her when she was no longer useful. Elena's cancer diagnosis is perfect timing, Sarah had written. If she dies during treatment, all the evidence points to her as the criminal mastermind who couldn't face justice. If she survives, she's too compromised by her illness to mount an effective defense. Elena realized that Sarah's legal advice had been designed to protect Michael rather than Elena. Every strategy Sarah had recommended, every precaution she'd suggested, had been calculated to benefit Michael's organization. Elena felt a rage unlike anything she'd experienced during 15 years of investigating financial criminals. Michael's betrayal had been devastating, but she'd never truly trusted him with her emotional well-being. Sarah's betrayal cut much deeper. Elena had trusted her sister with her life, and Sarah had been actively trying to end it. Elena immediately called Agent Torres on his secure line. Marcus, I need an emergency meeting. My sister has been working with Michael's organization from the beginning. She's been reporting every aspect of my investigation. Elena, are you certain that's a serious accusation? I have 18 months of email communications between Sarah and Michael. She's been paid over $300,000 to spy on me and manipulate my investigation. Elena heard Torres typing rapidly. Elena, where are you now? Home. But Marcus Sarah knows about tomorrow's task force meeting. Michael's organization has been anticipating our every move because Sarah's been feeding them intelligence. Elena, you need to get to the FBI field office immediately. Don't tell anyone where you're going and don't communicate with Sarah again until we can assess the security breach. Elena hung up and looked around her home office, realizing that nothing in her life was what it had appeared to be. Her marriage had been a criminal enterprise. Her sister had been a paid informant. Even her cancer treatment had been infiltrated by people who wanted her dead. But Elena had built her career on adapting to new evidence and adjusting strategies based on evolving circumstances. Sarah's betrayal was devastating personally, but professionally, it was just another piece of evidence in the largest case of her career. Elena gathered her most critical evidence files and prepared to leave for FBI protection. She'd lost her husband and her sister, but she'd gained something more valuable: absolute clarity about who was trying to destroy her and why. Michael's organization had made a critical error by recruiting Sarah. They'd assumed that family loyalty would trump professional integrity. They'd forgotten that Elena Vasquez had built her career on following evidence wherever it led, regardless of personal cost. Elena was about to demonstrate that her commitment to justice was stronger than any family bond. Elena's emergency meeting with Agent Torres took place in a secure conference room at the FBI field office at 11:47 p.m. The late hour reflected the urgency of the situation. Sarah's betrayal had compromised every aspect of their investigation. Elena said Torres said, reviewing the intercepted communications, "This changes everything. If Sarah's been reporting to Michael's organization for 18 months, they've been anticipating our investigation from the beginning." Elena activated her laptop and displayed the evidence she'd compiled. "Marcus, I think Sarah's betrayal might actually work in our favor." Torres looked skeptical. "Explain that." "Michael's organization thinks they've been controlling our investigation through Sarah's intelligence. They've been reacting to what they think we know, rather than what we actually know. That means they've revealed more about their operation than they realize." Elena pulled up a comprehensive analysis she'd completed during her drive to the FBI office. "Look at the pattern of their responses to Sarah's reports. Every time she told them about a discovery I'd made, they took specific actions to cover their tracks. Those actions reveal additional evidence of their crimes." Torres studied Elena's analysis with growing admiration. "Elena, you've been using their own intelligence operation against them." "I've been feeding Sarah specific pieces of information to see how Michael's organization would react. Their responses have revealed the full scope of their operation, including crimes I never would have discovered otherwise." Elena displayed a timeline showing how Michael's organization had responded to carefully crafted intelligence she'd provided through Sarah. "When I told Sarah I'd discovered the money laundering operation, they immediately moved $30 million to offshore accounts. When I mentioned investigating client deaths, they accelerated plans to eliminate 2 potential witnesses." "Elena, you've been conducting a counterintelligence operation against your own sister." "I've been conducting a forensic investigation that happens to include my sister as a subject. Sarah's betrayal is just another piece of evidence in the case." Torres reviewed Elena's evidence with the expression of someone witnessing a masterpiece of investigative work. "Elena, you've turned their entire intelligence advantage into a liability. They've been exposing themselves by trying to stay ahead of your investigation." Elena felt a cold satisfaction as she contemplated the irony. "Michael recruited Sarah to control and manipulate me. Instead, I've been using Sarah to control and manipulate his organization." Torres stood up and began making phone calls. "Elena, we're accelerating the timeline. If Michael's organization is planning to eliminate witnesses and liquidate assets, we need to move immediately." Elena gathered her evidence files, thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. 8 years of marriage to a criminal, 18 months of betrayal by her sister, 2 weeks of systematic investigation that had exposed one of the largest criminal organizations on the East Coast. "Marcus," Elena said as Torres coordinated law enforcement responses, "Michael made one critical error when he recruited Sarah." "What's that?" Elena smiled with the expression of someone who just checkmated an opponent in a game they didn't know they were playing. "He forgot that I'm better at this than he is." Elena's counterintelligence operation reached its climax at 6:00 a.m. on a Thursday morning when coordinated law enforcement teams simultaneously executed search warrants at 17 locations across Connecticut and New York. Elena watched from the FBI's mobile command center as federal agents raided Chen and Associates Michael's home and the offices of every shell company in his criminal network. Michael's organization had been expecting Elena to meet with federal investigators. They hadn't been expecting Elena to orchestrate a coordinated takedown that would dismantle their entire operation in a single morning. Elena monitored radio communications as teams secured evidence from each location. The scope of documentation was staggering. Millions of financial records, thousands of client files, and digital evidence that would provide investigators with complete visibility into 6 years of criminal operations. Elena, Agent Torres reported from the command center, "We've recovered over $200 million in domestic accounts and frozen another $400 million in offshore assets. Michael's organization won't be able to access their escape funds." Elena watched surveillance footage of Michael being arrested at his corporate housing. His expression shifted from confusion to panic to cold rage as federal agents explained the charges against him. Michael had spent years positioning Elena as the criminal mastermind of his organization. Now he was discovering that Elena had positioned him as the defendant in the most comprehensive financial crimes case in Connecticut history. Elena's systematic investigation had provided federal prosecutors with evidence supporting charges that would result in life sentences for multiple defendants: racketeering, money laundering, securities fraud, murder, federal corruption, and conspiracy charges that would ensure Michael's organization never operated again. But Elena's personal satisfaction came from watching Sarah's arrest at her law office in Manhattan. Sarah had thought she was manipulating Elena's investigation to protect Michael's organization. Instead, she'd been providing Elena with intelligence that revealed the full scope of federal corruption within the criminal network. "Elena," Lisa Chen reported from the SEC's Enforcement Division. "Sarah's communications have given us evidence of corruption involving 12 federal employees. This is going to result in the largest federal corruption prosecution in recent history." Elena realized that her investigation had accomplished something unprecedented. She'd turned her own betrayal into a weapon that would destroy everyone who'd tried to harm her. Elena's phone rang. Unknown number. "Elena Vasquez." "You think you've won?" Michael's voice was cold-controlled, speaking from federal detention. "I think I've exposed a criminal organization that's been operating for 6 years. Justice will determine who's won." "Elena, you have no idea how deep this goes. The people I work with don't accept losses gracefully." Elena looked around the FBI command center at the dozens of federal agents who'd spent the morning dismantling Michael's criminal empire. "Michael, the people you work with are either in federal custody or hiding in countries that will extradite them. Your organization is finished." "My organization is finished. But Elena, there are other organizations that don't appreciate federal informants. You've made yourself a target for people who have resources I never had." Elena felt a chill despite the morning warmth. Michael was threatening her with criminal organizations beyond his own network. "Michael, are you threatening a federal witness?" "I'm warning you that your investigation has consequences you haven't considered. Some problems can't be solved with forensic accounting." Elena hung up and immediately reported the threat to Agent Torres. Michael's organization had been dismantled, but Elena realized that her investigation had attracted attention from criminal networks that operated far beyond Connecticut's borders. Elena had spent 2 weeks exposing financial crimes that extended into organized crime, federal corruption, and international money laundering. She'd become the key witness in multiple federal prosecutions that would impact criminal organizations across the country. Elena looked at the evidence of her success: arrests, asset seizures, and federal charges that would ensure justice for hundreds of victims. But Michael's threat reminded her that some victories came with prices that extended far beyond the original conflict. Elena Vasquez had set out to clear her name and expose her husband's crimes. She'd succeeded beyond her wildest expectations. Now she was about to discover whether her analytical skills and federal protection would be sufficient to survive the consequences of her success. The forensic accountant had won the battle against Michael's organization. But the war for her survival was just beginning. Elena's federal protection detail was upgraded within hours of Michael's threat. Agent Torres arranged for a safe house in an undisclosed location while Elena's evidence was transferred to secure federal facilities. But Elena realized that hiding wouldn't solve the fundamental problem. Michael's criminal network had connections to organizations that operated far beyond federal law enforcement's immediate reach. "Elena." Agent Santos briefed her during the secure transport. "Michael's threat isn't idle. Our organized crime intelligence indicates his money laundering operation connected to at least 3 major criminal networks: the Torelli family in New York, the Kozlov organization out of Boston, and a Colombian cartel that's been moving money through Connecticut for years." Elena processed this information with the same analytical precision she'd applied to Michael's financial crimes. "Maria, these organizations lost money when we froze Michael's accounts. They're not just angry about losing an asset. They're angry about losing millions of dollars. Exactly. And Elena, your testimony could expose their entire financial infrastructure. You're not just a witness anymore. You're an existential threat to their operations. Elena understood that her investigation had evolved beyond personal vindication. She'd accidentally declared war on criminal organizations that had resources and capabilities far exceeding anything Michael's local network had possessed. But Elena had advantages that these criminal organizations didn't expect. 15 years of federal law enforcement experience had taught her how organized crime operated. Her analytical skills allowed her to predict their moves and counter their strategies. And most importantly, her evidence was so comprehensive that eliminating her wouldn't eliminate the threat to their operations. Elena called Agent Torres from the safe house. "Marcus, I need to meet with the Organized Crime Task Force. If these criminal networks are planning to move against me, we need to get ahead of their strategy. Elena, the safest approach is to keep you in protected custody until the trials are completed. Marcus, trials could take years, and hiding me doesn't address the fundamental problem. These organizations need to be dismantled, not avoided." Elena heard Torres typing rapidly. "Elena, what are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we use the same approach that worked against Michael. Let them think they're hunting me while I'm actually hunting them." Elena spent the next 48 hours in the safe house developing a comprehensive strategy for exposing the criminal networks that Michael's organization had served. She analyzed financial records seized during the raids, identifying money flows that connected Michael's laundering operation to 3 major criminal organizations. Elena's breakthrough came when she discovered that Michael's organization had been providing more than just money laundering services. They'd been maintaining detailed records of every criminal transaction, creating a comprehensive database of criminal activities that could destroy multiple organizations. Elena David Park reported during a secure video conference. Michael's digital records include 6 years of detailed documentation about every criminal transaction his organization processed. Money laundering amounts, source organizations, destination accounts, even records of bribes paid to law enforcement officials. Elena realized that Michael's meticulous record-keeping, the same trait that had allowed her to expose his crimes, had created evidence that would dismantle every criminal organization he'd worked with. "David, can you estimate how many criminal prosecutions these records could support?" "Elena, we're looking at evidence for potentially hundreds of federal prosecutions. Drug trafficking, human trafficking, arms dealing, political corruption, murder for hire. Michael's organization documented everything." Elena understood that the criminal networks threatening her had a much bigger problem than one potential witness. Michael's records contained evidence that could destroy their entire operations. Elena called Agent Torres with a proposal that would shift the balance of power in her favor. "Marcus, I want to offer these criminal organizations a choice. They can spend their resources trying to eliminate me, or they can spend their resources preparing for the hundreds of federal prosecutions that Michael's records will support." "Elena, you're talking about psychological warfare against organized crime." "I'm talking about using their own criminal paranoia against them. These organizations survive by controlling information and eliminating threats. But Elena's evidence is already distributed among multiple federal agencies. Killing me won't make it disappear." Elena's strategy was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of hiding from criminal organizations that wanted her dead, she would demonstrate that her death would accelerate rather than prevent their destruction. Elena was about to discover that the analytical skills that had made her the SEC's most effective forensic accountant would also make her one of the most dangerous opponents organized crime had ever faced. The pressure was building, but Elena Vasquez had learned that pressure could be redirected, focused, and used as a weapon against the people who'd tried to destroy her. Elena's strategy for neutralizing the organized crime threat required more than just evidence. It required public pressure that would make her elimination politically impossible. She needed to transform herself from a hidden federal witness into a public figure whose death would attract massive media attention and federal investigation. Elena's opportunity came when Rebecca Foster from the Wall Street Journal published her exclusive story about the Chen and Associates investigation. Foster's article didn't just cover the financial fraud. It detailed Elena's personal journey from cancer patient to federal informant, creating a narrative that captured national attention. The forensic accountant who took down a criminal empire while fighting cancer, became the most read financial crime story of the year. Elena's photograph appeared on the front page of newspapers across the country, accompanied by stories that portrayed her as both victim and hero. But Elena's real breakthrough came when elderly victims of Michael's schemes began contacting news organizations directly. Harold Morrison's widow, Margaret Chen's daughter, Robert Taylor's son. Family members of the murdered victims wanted their stories told. Elena worked with federal prosecutors to organize a press conference that would allow victims' families to speak publicly about Michael's crimes. The event was held at the Connecticut State Capitol with security provided by state police and federal marshals. Dorothy Morrison, Harold's 87-year-old widow, spoke first. Her voice trembled with age, but her words carried devastating clarity. My husband worked 43 years as a pharmaceutical researcher. He helped develop treatments that saved thousands of lives. When he retired, we invested our life savings with Michael Chen because we trusted him. Harold began asking questions when our account statements didn't make sense. 2 weeks later, my husband was dead. Elena watched from the audience as Dorothy Morrison described finding her husband's body, the apparent robbery that had taken only his financial documents, and the realization that his death had been murder, designed to protect Michael's criminal enterprise. Maria Chen, no relation to Michael despite the shared surname, spoke about her mother Margaret's final months. My mother was a retired school teacher. She lived on a fixed income and tried to make her savings last by investing with Chen & Associates. When she discovered her money was gone, she called Michael Chen every day demanding explanations. The stress contributed to her heart attack, but the doctors said her death was caused by medication that had been tampered with. Elena had investigated Margaret Chen's death and found evidence that someone had replaced her heart medication with substances that would cause fatal interactions. Margaret hadn't died from stress. She'd been poisoned. Robert Taylor's son David spoke last, his anger evident despite his controlled tone. My father was a World War II veteran who'd saved money his entire life to leave something for his grandchildren. Michael Chen convinced him to invest everything in a high-yield program that was supposedly designed for veterans. When Dad started asking questions, he was found dead at the bottom of his basement stairs. The police called it an accident, but my father had been going up and down those stairs for 20 years without falling. Elena knew that Robert Taylor's death had been staged to look accidental. Michael's organization had pushed an 82-year-old veteran down a flight of stairs to prevent him from exposing their fraud. The press conference generated national media coverage that transformed Elena's case from a regional financial crime story into a national symbol of justice for elderly victims of financial fraud. Cable news programs featured the victim families, newspaper editorials demanded justice, and social media campaigns supporting Elena, and the victims generated millions of interactions. Elena received hundreds of messages from other victims who'd been defrauded by investment schemes similar to Michael's operation. The victim testimony wave revealed that Michael's organization was part of a much larger pattern of financial crimes targeting elderly Americans. Elena worked with federal prosecutors to organize additional press conferences featuring victims from other fraudulent investment schemes. Each event generated more media attention and more public support for Elena's investigation. Elena, Rebecca Foster reported during one of their daily calls, "You've become the face of a national movement against financial elder abuse. The story isn't just about Michael Chen anymore. It's about systematic exploitation of vulnerable populations." Elena realized that her public profile was providing exactly the protection she needed from organized crime retaliation. Killing Elena Vasquez would no longer eliminate a federal witness. It would create a martyr whose death would generate massive law enforcement attention. Elena's victim testimony strategy reached its climax when she organized a congressional hearing on financial crimes against elderly Americans. Elena testified before the House Financial Services Committee, providing detailed evidence about Michael's organization and its connections to larger criminal networks. Committee members, Elena testified, "The Chen & Associates investigation has revealed that financial fraud against elderly Americans is not isolated criminal activity. It's systematic exploitation supported by organized crime networks that operate across state lines and international borders." Elena's congressional testimony was broadcast live on multiple news networks, cementing her status as a national expert on financial crimes. Her analytical presentation of evidence impressed both Republican and Democratic committee members, creating bipartisan support for legislation that would strengthen penalties for financial elder abuse. Elena's testimony included specific details about the organized crime networks that had been using Michael's operation for money laundering. She named the Torelli family, the Kozlov organization, and the Colombian cartel that had been processing illegal proceeds through Chen and Associates. These criminal organizations depend on financial infrastructure that operates in the shadows, Elena testified. The Chen and Associates investigation proves that we can dismantle their operations by following the money and holding their financial facilitators accountable. Elena's congressional appearance was followed by additional testimony from victim family members, federal investigators, and financial crimes experts. The hearing generated commitments for increased federal funding for elder abuse investigations and stronger regulatory oversight of investment management firms. Elena realized that her victim testimony strategy had accomplished multiple objectives. She generated public support that would make organized crime retaliation politically impossible. She'd created legislative momentum for stronger financial crimes enforcement. And she'd positioned herself as a national expert whose continued testimony would be valuable for multiple federal prosecutions. Elena, Agent Torres reported after her congressional testimony, "Our intelligence indicates that the organized crime networks have shifted their strategy. They're no longer planning to eliminate you. They're planning to eliminate the evidence and witnesses that could implicate them." Elena understood that her public profile had redirected the criminal threat away from herself and toward other potential witnesses. She'd used organized crime's own strategic calculations against them, making herself too valuable and too visible to eliminate. But Elena realized that her strategy had also escalated the conflict. The criminal organizations were no longer focused on protecting their existing operations. They were now focused on preventing the complete destruction of their networks. Elena Vasquez had wanted to expose Michael's crimes and clear her name. Instead, she'd become the central figure in a national campaign against organized crime that would either result in unprecedented federal prosecutions or unprecedented criminal violence. The victim testimony wave had given Elena the protection she needed. Now, she had to survive the criminal escalation that her success had triggered. The organized crime retaliation began 3 days after Elena's congressional testimony. The first target wasn't Elena herself. It was Angela Rodriguez, the former SEC compliance officer who'd been providing regulatory intelligence to Michael's organization. Elena learned about Rodriguez's death during her morning briefing at the safe house. Angela had been found dead in her Washington, D.C. apartment, apparently the victim of a robbery that had taken only her computers and financial documents. Elena, Agent Santos reported, "This wasn't random crime. Angela's apartment was systematically searched by professionals who knew exactly what they were looking for. They removed every piece of electronic equipment and every document that might contain evidence about the corruption network." Elena understood the message. The criminal organizations were eliminating witnesses and evidence in preparation for a comprehensive cover-up operation. Angela's death was both revenge for her cooperation and prevention of future testimony. Maria, who's next on their target list? Agent Santos consulted her intelligence files. Anyone who can provide testimony about the organized crime connections. James Patterson, Michael's brother-in-law. David Park, your cybersecurity analyst. And Rebecca Foster, the journalist who's been covering the story. Elena felt responsible for the escalating violence. Her investigation had exposed criminal networks that were now willing to commit murder to protect their operations. People who'd helped her were now targets because of their association with her case. "Maria, we need to get protection for everyone who's been involved in this investigation." Elena, we're talking about dozens of potential targets. The Bureau doesn't have resources to protect everyone who might be at risk. Elena realized that the criminal organizations had shifted to a strategy designed to overwhelm federal law enforcement capabilities. By targeting multiple witnesses simultaneously, they were forcing authorities to spread protection resources too thin to be effective. Elena's worst fears were confirmed when David Park's cybersecurity company was firebombed during the night shift. David survived because he'd been working from home, but 3 of his employees were hospitalized with severe burns. The attack destroyed servers containing backup copies of evidence that David had been analyzing. Elena. David reported from his hospital room. "They didn't just try to kill me. They tried to destroy the digital evidence. But Elena, they made a mistake. The most critical evidence is stored on cloud servers they can't access. Elena understood that the criminal organizations were operating from incomplete intelligence. They knew that digital evidence existed, but they didn't understand the full scope of Elena's evidence preservation strategy. The violence escalated when Rebecca Foster was attacked in the parking garage of the Wall Street Journal building. 2 men attempted to abduct her, but security guards interrupted the attack. Foster escaped with minor injuries, but the message was clear. Even prominent journalists weren't safe from retaliation. Elena. Foster called from her hospital bed. They wanted to know where you're being protected. They offered me money, then threatened my family, then tried to kidnap me when I refused to cooperate. Elena realized that the criminal organizations were attempting to locate her safe house through systematic intimidation of everyone associated with her case. They were willing to escalate to kidnapping and torture to obtain intelligence about federal protection operations. Elena's security was upgraded again when federal authorities discovered evidence of surveillance around previous safe house locations. The criminal organizations had been conducting reconnaissance of federal facilities, attempting to identify patterns that might reveal Elena's location. Elena, Agent Torres briefed her during another secure relocation. We've intercepted communications suggesting that the organized crime networks have hired professional killers. We're not just dealing with local criminals anymore. They've brought in specialists from outside the region. Elena understood that her investigation had escalated beyond anything federal law enforcement had anticipated. The criminal organizations were treating her case as an existential threat that required maximum resources to neutralize. Elena's breaking point came when she learned that her oncologist, Dr. Martinez, had been threatened at her home. Someone had left photographs of her children at her front door, along with a note warning her not to provide any medical testimony about Elena's treatment during the investigation period. Elena, doctor. Martinez called from police protection. They wanted to know if your cancer diagnosis was real or if it was somehow fabricated as part of an investigation strategy. I told them that was insane, but they said they needed to be certain. Elena realized that the criminal organizations were so paranoid about federal investigation techniques that they suspected her cancer diagnosis might be cover for an undercover operation. Their willingness to threaten a cancer doctor demonstrated how completely they'd lost perspective about proportional response. Elena called Agent Torres with a decision that surprised everyone involved in her protection. Marcus, I want to end the safe house protection. Elena, that's suicide. These organizations have demonstrated they'll kill anyone associated with your case. Marcus, hiding me isn't protecting anyone else. They're escalating violence because they think eliminating me will solve their problems. I need to demonstrate that my death won't help them. Elena's strategy was based on her understanding of criminal psychology. The organized crime networks were escalating violence because they believed Elena was the key to their destruction. Elena needed to prove that the evidence against them was so comprehensive and widely distributed that eliminating her would be pointless. Elena, Agent Santos warned, if you leave federal protection, we can't guarantee your safety. Maria, federal protection isn't guaranteeing anyone's safety. Angela Rodriguez is dead. David Park's employees are hospitalized. Rebecca Foster was nearly kidnapped. Hiding me isn't solving the problem. It's making it worse. Elena's decision to abandon safe house protection was the most dangerous gamble of her career. But Elena had built her professional reputation on taking calculated risks based on thorough analysis. Elena was about to discover whether her analysis of criminal psychology was accurate enough to keep her alive. Elena's decision to abandon federal protection was part of a comprehensive strategy she'd been developing since the violence escalated. Instead of hiding from the criminal organizations that wanted her dead, Elena planned to use herself as bait in a coordinated takedown operation that would neutralize all 3 networks simultaneously. Elena's strategy required precise timing and coordination between multiple federal agencies. She worked with Agent Torres to develop an operation that would use the criminal organization's focus on eliminating her to expose their operational capabilities and leadership structures. Elena, Agent Torres warned during the operational planning, "This is the most dangerous federal operation I've ever been involved in. If anything goes wrong, if our timing is off by even minutes, you'll be killed. Marcus, If we don't stop these organizations now, they'll keep killing witnesses until there's no one left to testify. Angela Rodriguez is dead because she helped us. David Park's employees are hospitalized because he analyzed evidence for us. This ends now. Elena's plan was elegant in its complexity. She would appear to be vulnerable and isolated, encouraging the criminal organizations to make coordinated moves against her. Federal surveillance teams would document their operations, identify their personnel, and gather evidence for comprehensive prosecutions. Elena returned to her Greenwich home under the pretense of recovering personal items before permanent relocation. The house had been under surveillance by multiple criminal organizations for weeks, making it the perfect location for a coordinated confrontation. Elena's first day back in Greenwich was deliberately routine. She visited her oncologist for a scheduled appointment, stopped at the grocery store, and spent the evening at home reviewing medical bills. To external surveillance, she appeared to be a cancer patient trying to maintain normal routines while under stress. But Elena's apparently normal activities were part of a carefully choreographed operation. Her oncologist visit provided federal agents with intelligence about surveillance teams. Her grocery store trip allowed authorities to photograph criminal operatives. Her evening at home drew all three organized crime networks into position for the coordinated takedown. Elena's role in the operation required her to maintain normal behavior while wearing sophisticated recording equipment that would document any attempted intimidation or violence. Federal surveillance teams were positioned throughout Greenwich, ready to intervene if Elena's safety was threatened. Elena's first contact came at 8:30 p.m. when her doorbell rang. Through her security camera, she saw two well-dressed men who appeared to be conducting some kind of business inquiry. "Mrs. Vasquez," the older man spoke with a slight New York accent. "We'd like to discuss some business matters with you." Elena activated her recording equipment and opened the door with the chain still attached. "I'm not conducting any business meetings at my home." "Mrs. Vasquez, we represent some investors who were affected by your husband's recent legal difficulties. We'd like to discuss a mutually beneficial arrangement." Elena recognized the approach from her years investigating organized crime. They were attempting to determine whether she might be willing to cooperate with their damage control efforts before escalating to more direct methods. "Gentlemen, any business discussions need to go through my attorney. I'm not authorized to discuss my husband's legal case." The younger man stepped closer to the door. "Mrs. Vasquez. Our clients are very concerned about some of the testimony you've been providing to federal authorities. They'd appreciate an opportunity to clarify some misunderstandings." Elena understood that this was the criminal organization's final attempt to negotiate before escalating to violence. "I understand your client's concerns, but I'm not in a position to modify my testimony." The older man's tone shifted from polite inquiry to subtle threat. "Mrs. Vasquez, our clients have significant resources and long memories. They're hoping to resolve this situation in a way that's beneficial for everyone involved." Elena was recording everything while federal surveillance teams documented the intimidation attempt. "Gentlemen, I think this conversation has gone as far as it can go." Elena closed the door and immediately activated the emergency signal that would bring federal agents to her location. But the criminal operatives didn't leave. Through her security cameras, Elena watched them make phone calls and take positions around her property. Elena's phone rang. Unknown number. "Mrs. Vasquez, this is your last opportunity to reconsider. Our clients are prepared to make this situation very unpleasant for you and everyone you care about." Elena looked out her window and saw additional vehicles arriving. The criminal organizations were converging on her location with the kind of coordinated precision that indicated professional operational planning. "I understand your client's position," Elena replied, maintaining the calm tone she'd used during 15 years of federal investigations. "But I think you should understand mine. This conversation is being recorded by federal authorities who are currently documenting your organization's operations." Elena heard silence on the other end of the call, followed by rapid conversation in what sounded like multiple languages. "Mrs. Vasquez, you're making a mistake that your family will regret." Elena activated her emergency beacon as federal surveillance teams moved into position around her property. "Actually, I think you're the ones making the mistake." Elena's coordinated takedown operation reached its climax as FBI tactical teams simultaneously engaged criminal operatives at her Greenwich home and at 17 other locations across Connecticut, New York, and Massachusetts. Elena watched from her protected position as federal agents arrested the men who'd been attempting to intimidate her. Their phones contained communications with criminal leadership that would provide evidence for additional prosecutions. Elena, Agent Torres reported over radio, "We've got positive arrests at all target locations. The Torelli family leadership, the Kozlov organization's operational team, and the Colombian cartel's financial coordinators, plus dozens of associates and enablers." Elena's decision to use herself as bait had resulted in the most comprehensive organized crime takedown in recent federal law enforcement history. The criminal organization's focus on eliminating her had exposed their entire operational structure to federal surveillance. Elena's recording equipment had captured detailed evidence of criminal conspiracy, intimidation, and threats that would support federal racketeering charges against dozens of defendants. The surveillance teams had documented coordination between criminal organizations that proved the existence of an interstate criminal enterprise. "Elena," as Agent Santos reported, "your operation has given us evidence for prosecutions that will put these organizations out of business permanently. Money laundering, racketeering, conspiracy, intimidation of federal witnesses. We've got everything." Elena realized that her coordinated takedown had accomplished something unprecedented. Instead of hiding from criminal organizations until their cases could be tried, she'd systematically exposed and neutralized them before they could eliminate witnesses or destroy evidence. Elena's gamble with her own life had resulted in the complete destruction of the criminal networks that had threatened her. But more importantly, it had ensured justice for hundreds of victims who'd been defrauded, intimidated, or murdered by these organizations. Elena Vasquez had transformed herself from victim to hunter to bait to victor in the most complex criminal investigation of her career. The forensic accountant had proven that analytical precision, strategic thinking, and calculated courage could defeat even the most sophisticated criminal enterprises. The federal prosecutions resulting from Elena's investigation became the largest organized crime trial in Connecticut history. Elena spent 6 months providing testimony in multiple courtrooms, walking juries through the financial evidence that connected dozens of defendants to years of criminal activity. Michael Chen's trial was the centerpiece of the prosecution. Elena testified for 4 days, methodically explaining how Michael had used her identity to create a criminal empire that defrauded elderly investors while providing financial services to organized crime networks. Members of the jury, Elena testified during her final day on the witness stand, "Michael Chen didn't just steal money from his clients. He stole my identity, my reputation, and my life for 8 years. He used my credentials to give legitimacy to criminal activities that resulted in the murders of at least 3 innocent people." Elena watched Michael throughout her testimony, studying the man she'd been married to for 8 years. His expressions shifted from denial to anger to resignation as Elena systematically destroyed every aspect of his defense strategy. Michael's attorney attempted to portray Elena as an unreliable witness whose cancer treatment had affected her memory and judgment. Elena's response was devastating. "Counsel, I have eidetic memory for financial transactions and mathematical relationships. Cancer affected my health, not my analytical abilities. Every piece of evidence I've presented has been verified by federal investigators and confirmed by digital forensics." Elena's testimony was supported by hundreds of documents, recorded conversations, and digital evidence that David Park's team had recovered from Michael's computers. The evidence was so comprehensive that Michael's defense team eventually advised him to accept a plea agreement. Michael Chen was sentenced to 45 years in federal prison for racketeering money, laundering securities fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and intimidation of federal witnesses. The judge specifically noted that Michael's use of Elena's cancer diagnosis to plan her elimination demonstrated calculated cruelty that warrants maximum punishment. James Patterson, Michael's brother-in-law and money laundering coordinator, received 35 years. Angela Rodriguez, the former SEC compliance officer, had been murdered before trial, but her recorded testimony was admitted as evidence that helped convict 12 other defendants. Sarah Kim's trial was the most personally difficult for Elena. Sarah had been Elena's sister-trusted advisor and betrayer for 18 months. Elena's testimony about Sarah's betrayal was emotional but thorough. Sarah Kim used her position as my sister and my attorney to provide intelligence to a criminal organization that was planning to murder me. Elena testified. She profited from that betrayal while encouraging the criminals to accelerate their plans to eliminate me. Sarah was sentenced to 25 years for conspiracy money laundering and conspiracy to commit murder. Elena watched her sister's sentencing without emotion, having processed the betrayal during months of testimony preparation. The organized crime trials resulted in convictions for 47 defendants across 3 major criminal networks. The Torelli family leadership received sentences ranging from 20 to 40 years. The Kozlov organization was dismantled completely, with its leaders receiving life sentences for multiple murders. The Colombian cartel's financial operations were destroyed, with their coordinators facing extradition for additional charges. Elena's victim restitution work resulted in the recovery of $640 million from frozen accounts and seized assets. The money was distributed to over 800 victims who'd been defrauded by various schemes operated by Michael's criminal network. Dorothy Morrison. Harold's widow received $2.3 million, the full amount her husband had invested plus interest in compensation for his murder. She used part of the money to establish a foundation supporting elderly victims of financial crimes. Elena Dorothy Morrison said during the restitution ceremony, "You gave my husband's death meaning by ensuring that the people who killed him face justice. Harold would be proud of what you've accomplished." Elena's congressional testimony resulted in the passage of the Financial Elder Abuse Prevention Act, which strengthened federal penalties for investment fraud targeting elderly Americans and created new funding for victim assistance programs. Elena received the FBI Director's Award for Exceptional Service, the SEC's Distinguished Service Award, and recognition from multiple law enforcement agencies for her role in dismantling organized crime networks. But Elena's most meaningful recognition came from cancer patients who'd followed her story through media coverage. Elena received thousands of letters from people who'd been inspired by her determination to fight criminals while fighting cancer. Elena. One letter read, "You showed me that cancer doesn't have to define what we can accomplish. You proved that we can still fight for justice even when we're fighting for our lives." Elena's medical treatment had been successful throughout the investigation and trials. Her oncologist reported that her cancer remained in remission with excellent long-term prognosis. "Elena," Dr. Martinez said during her final follow-up appointment, "you've proven that stress doesn't necessarily interfere with cancer recovery. Your determination to pursue justice may have actually contributed to your healing process." Elena's professional reputation was completely restored through the trials and media coverage. She was recognized as one of the most effective forensic accountants in federal law enforcement history, with expertise that had resulted in the largest organized crime prosecutions in regional history. Elena received job offers from multiple federal agencies, private consulting firms, and academic institutions. But Elena had already decided what she wanted to do with the rest of her career. Elena. Vasquez was ready to transform her expertise into something that would help other victims of financial crimes while preventing future criminal enterprises from exploiting vulnerable populations. Justice had been served for Elena, for Michael's victims, and for the federal law enforcement system that had been corrupted by criminal organizations. But Elena understood that justice was just the beginning of her next chapter. 1 year after the coordinated takedown, Elena stood in the conference room of the Vasquez Financial Crimes Institute, looking out at her team of forensic accountants, federal investigators, and victim advocates. The institute occupied 2 floors of a building in downtown Hartford with state-of-the-art analytical equipment and secure facilities for processing financial evidence. Elena had used her restitution payment and book advance to establish the institute as a nonprofit organization that would provide free financial forensics services to elderly victims of investment fraud. The institute also trained law enforcement agencies in advanced techniques for investigating complex financial crimes. Ladies and gentlemen, Elena addressed her team during their weekly briefing. "We've completed our analysis of the Morrison case. The evidence package is ready for federal prosecutors." Elena's institute had developed a reputation for the kind of comprehensive financial forensics that had exposed Michael's criminal empire. In their first year of operation, they'd provided evidence supporting prosecutions that had recovered over $200 million for fraud victims. Elena's personal transformation was as dramatic as her professional evolution. She'd lost 35 pounds during her cancer treatment, but had regained her strength through a disciplined fitness routine. Her hair had grown back thicker and healthier than before. She looked like someone who'd survived everything that could be thrown at her and emerged stronger. Elena's Greenwich home had been sold with proceeds donated to cancer research. She'd purchased a smaller house in Hartford closer to her work and free from memories of her marriage to Michael. The new house was decorated with awards from law enforcement agencies and photographs from victim restitution ceremonies. Elena's personal life remained deliberately simple. She'd dated occasionally, but hadn't pursued serious relationships. Her focus was on building the Institute and developing new techniques for exposing financial crimes. Elena, her assistant Rebecca Park, David's sister who joined the Institute after completing her law degree, announced, "You have a call from Agent Torres. He says it's about the New York investigation." Elena smiled as she picked up the phone. Federal agencies regularly consulted the Institute about complex financial crimes cases. Elena's expertise was in constant demand for investigations involving organized crime, political corruption, and sophisticated fraud schemes. Elena's transformation from cancer patient to criminal victim to federal witness to criminal justice advocate was complete. She'd proven that analytical precision, moral courage, and strategic thinking could overcome any criminal enterprise regardless of its sophistication or resources. Elena looked at the photographs on her office wall. Images of victims who'd received justice, criminals who'd been imprisoned, and law enforcement officials who'd been honored for their work on cases the Institute had supported. Elena Vasquez had spent 8 years unknowingly married to a criminal. She'd spent 2 weeks exposing his crimes. She'd spent 6 months ensuring justice was served. Now she was spending the rest of her career making certain that other victims would receive the same justice she'd fought to achieve. The forensic accountant's revenge was complete. Elena's transformation into a force for justice was just beginning. Elena Vasquez returned to her oncologist for her 5-year follow-up appointment the following month. Dr. Martinez reported that Elena remained in complete remission with no evidence of cancer recurrence. Elena's case had become a medical school teaching example of how purpose and determination could support healing even under extraordinary stress. The Vasquez Financial Crimes Institute continued to grow eventually, becoming a model for similar organizations across the country. Elena's techniques for exposing financial crimes were adopted by federal agencies worldwide. Michael Chen died in federal prison in his 7th year of incarceration, reportedly from complications related to diabetes. Elena felt no satisfaction from his death, only closure. Elena never remarried, but she maintained friendships with many of the law enforcement professionals who'd helped her build her cases. She often said that the best revenge against betrayal was building relationships based on mutual respect and shared commitment to justice. Sarah Kim was released after serving 18 years of her sentence. She never contacted Elena, and Elena never sought contact with her. Some betrayals Elena learned were too profound for forgiveness, but not too profound for moving forward. Elena's story became required reading in forensic accounting programs and federal law enforcement training. Her techniques for building comprehensive financial crimes cases were studied by investigators around the world. But Elena's greatest satisfaction came from the letters she continued to receive from victims who'd found justice through the Institute's work. Elena had learned that the best revenge against criminal betrayal was ensuring that other victims never had to face their battles alone. Elena Vasquez started this story as a cancer patient whose husband was abandoning her at her most vulnerable moment. She ended it as the founder of the Vasquez Financial Crimes Institute that has helped recover over $640 million for more than 800 fraud victims. But here's what's truly incredible about Elena's story. She didn't just survive betrayal by her husband Michael and her sister Sarah. She didn't just expose a criminal organization that had murdered Harold Morrison, Margaret Chen, and Robert Taylor. She didn't just take down corrupt federal officials and 3 major organized crime networks. Elena transformed her personal tragedy into a weapon for justice that's still protecting victims today. The coordinated takedown she orchestrated resulted in 47 criminal convictions, including Michael's 45-year federal prison sentence. The techniques she developed are now used by federal agencies worldwide. The Financial Elder Abuse Prevention Act she helped pass has prevented thousands of elderly Americans from being defrauded. Elena proved that sometimes the best revenge isn't just survival, it's transformation. It's turning your worst betrayal into the foundation for something that helps others fight back. Michael Chen thought he was discarding damaged goods when he abandoned his cancer patient wife. Instead, he just created the most dangerous enemy organized crime had ever faced. If Elena's story inspired you, if it made you think about the power of analytical thinking and moral courage under pressure, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Because we've got more stories about ordinary people who did extraordinary things when criminals tried to destroy them. Tomorrow, we're diving into the story of a kindergarten teacher who discovered her principal was running a human trafficking operation through the school system. And what she did to expose it will leave you speechless. Until then, remember the most dangerous person to betray might just be someone who looks completely harmless. The quiet forensic accountant fighting cancer turned out to be the one who could build federal cases that send entire criminal organizations to prison for life. See you tomorrow.